Elevated CSF, which is cerebral spinal fluid pressure, can cause two problems. I'm going to redo that. We can edit this. Okay, starting over. Hey TID fam, welcome to season 2 of the Invisible Diaries. We're your hosts, Misty and Amber. I'm Misty from MistyBlueDream.com, a chronic illness lifer with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a congenital heart warrior. I am a biomedical major, writer, mom, and advocate.
And I'm Amber from the AutoimmuneAdvocate.com. I'm a mom, health coach, advocate, and fellow chronic illness warrior. And together we created the Invisible Diaries to shed light on invisible and chronic illnesses through education, advocacy, and awareness.
The Invisible Diaries isn't just about sharing our story, but also including each and every one of yours. But first, a quick disclaimer. Any information discussed in this podcast is strictly our opinion and for informational purposes only. It is not meant as medical advice and should not be taken that way. Always consult with your doctor or medical team.
We know battling chronic illness can be hard, and if you find yourself or someone you love in crisis and need someone to talk to, you can call the National Suicide Support Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, which provides free and confidential support in the U.S. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Again, that number is 1-800-273-TALK.
Any cited resources mentioned will be linked on our website, theinvisibleddiaries.com. Now let's get started. For this episode, we discuss intracranial hypertension with our patient advocate, Amanda. According to rarediseases.org, intracranial hypertension is characterized by increased pressure inside the skull. Intracranial means inside the skull, and hypertension means high fluid pressure.
Intracranial hypertension means that the pressure of the fluid that surrounds the brain, the cerebrospinal fluid or CSF, is too high. Elevated CSF pressure can cause two problems: severe headache and visual loss. If the elevated CSF pressure remains untreated, permanent visual loss or blindness may result. Wow.
Yes, that's crazy.
That's intense.
So go ahead and introduce yourself.
So my name is Amanda. I currently live in Cocoa, Florida. I'm originally from Huntington, West Virginia. In my spare time, I like to listen to music. I like to read. I love learning new things every day. And I love debating people. I love going back and forth about politics, and which is the best thing to do. But so yeah, I was diagnosed with idiopathic intracranial hypertension, also known as pseudotumor cerebri. So that's me though now.
So tell us about your experience with intracranial hypertension. When did you get diagnosed and what was the process like?
So it took a really long time for me to get diagnosed. How do I make this long story short?
Well, feel free, we got time. We just started.
So I was always pretty healthy, never really had any issues. Around 2014, I started getting like weird feelings in my ears. And I was like, well, this is kind of weird, but I brushed it off. And then I got to where it was like movement and muffled hearing. And so I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, it's just an ear infection. I'm like, okay, I've never had an ear infection.
Oh, wow.
And sinus stuff going on, but I'm like, okay, whatever. So I started meds and drops for my ears. And about 2 weeks later, my ears started ringing constantly, and it hasn't stopped since. So I figured, oh, that's probably because I've exposed myself to loud music. I was always in music venues, bartending, always around loud environments. But then 2015, I started getting, I was feeling like I was on a boat all the time. And which I kind of brushed it off. I'm like, okay, maybe it's just getting older. I don't know, maybe I'm too tired or whatever. So then I started getting, I would wake up in the middle of the night and the room would be spinning. And
wow.
Yeah. And I thought I was dreaming. I would just go back to sleep and
you're like, I'm done, I'm going back to bed. Like, oh no.
Yeah, it's
wow.
Great. So I got to a point where I had, I don't know, maybe a few weeks passed by and I woke up just spinning. I was spinning for like 2 weeks. And it wasn't
Wow.
nonstop, but if I would turn my head to the left, it was like, I felt like Alice in Wonderland in the rabbit hole. Like, it was awful. So after that, I go to the doctor and they're like, oh, well, you have BPPV, which is when the crystals in your ears get off and you get dizzy.
Yeah.
And they do the Epley maneuver and you feel better, which I didn't really get better. I continued to have the dizziness. I was going to the ear doctor, neurologist. I mean, I was back and forth for years. My ENT would say, no, it's your brain. And my neurologist would say, no, I think it's your ears. And I'm like, what is going on? Like,
yes, the classic getting passed back and forth.
Yeah. So during all this, I'm miserable. It got to the point where I couldn't work. I was becoming severely depressed because I'm like, I thought if you go to the doctor, they give you, a diagnosis or some medicine, and they couldn't figure it out. But so I got to the point where I was like, I'm done. I was getting symptoms where I couldn't like grip my toothbrush. I could hear intracranial noises. I didn't know that's what it was. Like, I'd be laying in bed and I would like move my eyes and I could hear it in my ears.
Oh.
And I would tell the doctors and they're like, oh.
Now I'm like moving my eyes, listening.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I was like, am I losing it? Like, what is going on here, So they were like, oh, the whole, you're anxious, you're depressed. And I'm like, of course, like,
yeah.
what's going on? Yeah. So I went to my last neurologist appointment in 2018. And I was like, if he can't give me any answers, I'm done. I got to figure this out either holistically or something else. Well, we went through the whole MS, which I didn't have, vestibular migraines, which he diagnosed me that at the time. It kind of comes with the IH. So at that appointment, I got no answer. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out on my own. Come January, I started getting this weird gray box in my vision, like my peripheral vision. And I was like, oh, it's just anxiety. Oh, no, I'd say a couple weeks. I called the eye doctor and I'm like, hey, I'm seeing this weird box thingy in my vision. Should I get it checked out? And they're like, absolutely, like, come in.
Oh my God.
So I go in and it's an optometrist here in Rockledge. And she's looking in my eyes and she says, do you have ringing in your ears? And I was like, yes. She's like, dizziness, headaches. At this time, I really wasn't getting many headaches. But, she was saying all these things that I had been experiencing. And I was like, yes. She said, well, your optic nerves are swollen. You have papilledema, which is not good.
Wow.
She's like, I think you may have she called it pseudotumor. So I start crying. I'm like, I have like finally an answer, but I had no idea what it was.
When you hear tumor, you forget the pseudo part. You just hear tumor, and I'm sure you're probably just like overwhelmed.
Absolutely. So I get referred to a neuro-ophthalmologist, and he says, you do have papilledema, your optic nerves are swollen, and if it's not something like MS, which I was already tested for, I think you may have the IIH. So he sent me to all these specialists down south, Miami, I went to Gainesville, and they all were kind of hesitant to diagnose me. So to confirm it, they sent me for a spinal tap. So did spinal tap, that was crazy. But so basically when you have IIH, your spinal fluid is elevated. Typically normal spinal fluid measures 25, I think it's milliliters maybe, or less. So they did mine and it was at 28, which is slightly elevated. However, it can go up and down. Some women have, like, I say women because most women are affected by this, men too, but their levels go up all the way up to like 60. So I ended up getting low pressure after the spinal tap. So I had to go back in, get a blood patch. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yep.
Wow. Explain it though, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, when they pulled my spinal fluid out, I don't know they pulled too much, or if I didn't produce it as quickly, or I'm not, I don't think doctors really understand spinal fluid, honestly. So it got too low. I had nothing cushioning my brain. So if I pumped it up, it was, imagine the worst headache you've ever had.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the blood patches where I had to go back in, they drew blood from my arm and they insert that blood back into the same area where they pulled my spinal fluid. And the way they knew that I needed a blood patch, they kind of hung me like this. And they say, when we lift you, if you still have a headache, we're going to do a blood patch. So I'm like, okay, I don't care what you have to do, just get rid of this headache. So they lifted me, and of course, I was still in pain. So they put me in for the blood patch. Probably within 10 minutes, I felt so much better. My headache was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So at that point, I went back to my neurologist, and he's like, well, it's kind of odd that you got the spinal headache if you have elevated pressure. So there's always been this like confusion between all my doctors. Like, they say I'm a complicated case.
Sorry, we just laugh because that's why we do what we do, is because everyone gets the same damn thing. It's like, yeah. That's why I'm so glad you're joining us to raise awareness on this.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so go on.
They started me on some meds called Diamox, and they're basically this like hardcore diuretic. They made me super sick. I mean, it was awful. And I had to take them for I think 4 months. A lot of people who are diagnosed will have to take it forever.
Wow.
Or until, depending on their level of optic nerve damage, some people have to get a shunt in their brain, or some people get stents. Every case is different, and IAH affects everyone differently. In my case, I feel like it affects me more with dizziness and feeling off balance. And however, after my blood patch, my spinal tap situation, I started getting headaches, which I didn't have before. So now I'm like,
wow.
Yeah. So, which everything is getting better. I still have symptoms. According to my doctors, I am in remission. However, I still have some neurological symptoms. And I think they tell you you're in remission when your optic nerve swelling goes down, because that's what they're mostly concerned about. Because if you have damage to your optic nerve, you can go blind. And getting that diagnosis was rough.
So how long would you say that took, the process?
To get the diagnosis?
Mm-hmm. How many years was that?
About 5 years.
Dang.
That's crazy. Is there an average time to find a diagnosis?
Here's the thing. So IAH affects a lot of women who are obese. If someone comes in and they're obese or morbidly obese and they have swollen optic nerves, the neuro-ophthalmologist is probably going to say, okay, you might have IAH. And they may get diagnosed quicker than me. I was overweight when I was diagnosed, almost obese. So I think that's why I was kind of ignored. But there's women and men who get it, who are skinny. So I don't know. I think for everyone it's different.
Well, that brings me to my next question, because there's 3 categories that classify IH, right? So there's acute, chronic, and idiopathic. And of course, yours is idiopathic, meaning they don't know exactly what causes it, right?
Right. So they've mentioned hormonal imbalance. A lot of women who have estrogen dominance and develop PCOS have it. I don't have estrogen dominance. Well, I think I do. I'm not diagnosed, but they have PCOS. So I think it's hormone related for me. And I did notice when I started having symptoms when they were mild, I was thinner. And, the sicker I got, the heavier I got, the sicker I got, and the worse things got. So I kind of feel like weight definitely has something to do with it for sure.
Have you noticed any type of external triggers, like environmental or that time of the month, since you said it might be hormonal? Do you notice fluctuations there for you?
For my pressure, any kind of hormonal change like ovulation or menstruation, I can tell that my pressure is going up. I can feel it in my head.
I feel like that controls everything. It makes everybody's symptoms worse. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So like big box stores, I used to not be able to go in them because I was so dizzy, and the lights and people talking, I was like, yeah. So a lot of sensory issues, but I've noticed, like with the Diamox, I had the opposite effect on me. It made me really sick, and so I feel like everything in my life, affects it. Little like going to the grocery store, going to work, sitting in front of a computer all day,
Yeah.
So I also have a nystagmus. You guys familiar with that?
What is it?
A nystagmus. So basically when my pressure gets high, my right eye has a downward beat to it.
Oh.
And you probably wouldn't be able to notice it. My eye doctor can see it. Because for a while I was like, my eye is bouncing. And they're like,
Whoa.
what are you talking about? And he finally caught it. He took a video and he's like, I'm going to show my colleagues. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I'm like, this is really happening. And,
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you sent us some resources when we were going back and forth about Mirena and Accutane being linked to IIH. Can you share a little more information about that?
So there is a, I guess, chemical that they use in the Mirena IUD, like progesterone based. And some women, it causes them to develop the intracranial hypertension. As for Accutane, I think from what I've read, there's an ingredient, I don't know the name, but it affects women's hormones and it causes them to develop IIH. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the doctor will tell you this when you're taking these meds,
No.
You think you're.
And we're gonna upload those resources and the links that you sent that kind of go over that in detail. So anyone listening, they can check out our website and we'll share those links too that you sent.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because I have PCOS and I was diagnosed at 14 with PCOS. And I had Mirena after I had my son because I actually got pregnant on the pill because I have really big hormone swings. And my body actually rejected the Mirena. I remember a radiologist telling me, he was like, I don't know what it is about this particular IUD. He's like, but your body is like, no way, like get it out. And so it's interesting to me because I have some of those symptoms, but mine's always been related to POTS, to dysautonomia. So I find it kind of crazy how much overlaps, like, visual disturbances and sensory overload. I mean, that's intense.
But they don't really test for that kind of stuff. I've never had a spinal fluid because I've had ringing in my ears for 10, 15, 20 years. Like I pop my ears I have pressure and I have the vertigo and stuff. But like, I feel like for people younger or our age or whatever, like I would never probably end up getting tested for that. That's just how things are. Like to hear you say, for 5 years that you're like, oh, maybe it's stress and being dismissed. I mean, it's just sad that that's how things are.
Well, it's probably that your body rejected that IUD.
Yeah, for sure.
And POTS, a lot of people who have POTS develop IIH. There's a lot of things that, like right now, I could possibly have Sjogren's. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like once one thing's off, it's kind of like,
Yep, that polyautoimmunity, we talk about that a lot. We say, because it's like a Venn diagram, that everything starts to overlap and that at some point it's kind of hard to name your biggest monster that causes all these other smaller, rabbit holes that you go down. But I also wanted to ask you, since you had kind of been bounced around and you were in that process of feeling like you weren't getting validated, like you knew something was wrong, but all of these specialists were kind of like, we're not sure, send you back to this one. And then you finally meet someone that goes, something's wrong and this is what I think, and I'm going to send you to a real specialist that knows what was that? What did that feel like for you?
Well, I cried. I was like sad and happy tears.
Mm-hmm.
But once I got my official diagnosis, I was scared. I mean, I was like, I have something that could possibly compromise my vision, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm never going to be the same again. I'm never going to feel the same. Like, you know, I was just like, it was hard, but you know, you get to a point where you accept it and you figure out ways to live your life around it. And, you know, and I'm always researching, I'm always trying to figure things out. I'm always reading, you know, studies. And what's interesting is I have never met anyone else who has IIH. And, you know, it's 1 in 100,000. And
Oh, wow.
I felt alone because I'm like, I can't talk to anyone about this, you know?
Yeah.
So,
with that statistic though, do you think that it's really 1 in 100,000, or do you think there's just a lot of people maybe that are like you, that they don't maybe pursue it as much? Because a lot of people, after they see quite a few specialists, they just kind of go, okay, well, everyone's telling me that there's nothing really there, or they can't really help me, so they give up.
They give up, or maybe they were misdiagnosed with vertigo or something like that, and then that's what they stick to, and it fits the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there walking around with this, you know, and they don't know it, and their vision is being. However, my thing is, I tell everybody, go to the eye doctor once a month, or not once a month. I go once a month, but once a year. Go get your eyes checked, you know? Because
even if you don't have glasses, you have perfect vision. I mean, it's something a lot of people forget about.
It's the same with teeth.
And your eyes say a lot about your health. And it was funny because I never, through this whole trying to get diagnosed, this doctor, that doctor, I never went to the eye doctor. I was like, it's not my eyes. I need to focus on, you know, my ears and, you know, but
wow.
I went to the eye doctor and like, oh yeah. So
how have you been managing symptoms?
For a while, it was really hard. Because you know, my doctor tells me you need to lose more weight because, you know, you lose more weight, you'll feel better. But when you're tired, you know, I've been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which comes with IIH. So I'm a really strong person. Like, I get up to work, I go to work every day. I feel like crap, but I just push through. And, you know, I'm like, I've felt worse, you know, on my really, really bad days. I stay positive, you know. There's not really, I got to a point where I felt like I needed a cane, but lately I've changed my diet. I'm following the medical medium protocol. I'm no gluten, no dairy, no peanuts, no caffeine, which I miss so much. And I'm feeling so much better. Like, I thought it was just a fad, but it's really a thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's important to remember for a lot of people that we say it all the time, you know, like Misty and I have some of the same issues, but our bodies are very different with what we can tolerate. And I'm sure IIH is the same in that, you know, like you say, it's for one person, this might work, and for somebody else, this might work. And so there's such a big trial and error in there, like with having to be brave to be able to say, I'm going to try something and take this into my own hands, you know, what I can control. And so, I mean, that's amazing that you're on top of it.
Yeah.
And that you're advocating and bringing awareness to something that, like you say, a lot of people, you know, I had never heard of it before.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that they've been changing the name. They're trying to keep the name now with IIH instead of the pseudotumor, whatever it was called.
Well, what amazes me is the first case was in 1880.
Wow.
I mean, 2020. You haven't figured this out yet? Like, and the fact that, like, you know, we have a lot of overweight people and obesity and women who have hormones. Like, let's figure out, please. So.
Well, we say, I wonder if it's kind of like some of the syndromes and diseases that we have and talk about, that kind of all the women got grouped into the hysteria group, where it's kind of like, oh, they're just, you know, they're overreacting.
They're on their periods.
It's anxiety, it's all of these other things. And so I think, especially now, it's important for our listeners and for other people that are suffering and advocating, that you remember that if something feels off, something's probably off, you know?
Yeah, so it's great that you went with your gut and continued and, to see these doctors and even just like when you said, okay, this is my last time of like, if you don't figure this out, then you're going to figure out your next step. I mean, I think that's great that you were able to do that.
Yeah. I think what frustrates me the most about this whole experience is doctors not listening and taking me serious, and even those around me. I say, well, I'm not feeling well. And some of my friends, I would bail because, I have increased pressure in my brain. I have something that mimics a brain tumor. And they would think I was just, being lame.
Yeah.
No, I have serious, you don't see it when you look at me. You can't tell that my eye's bouncing and I'm dizzy. And, I've developed anxiety with this. And so I've learned how to teach people around me. This is what I go through. Like I make like my boyfriend, I'm like, please read this.
Good.
This is what I'm going through. And if I'm being a little, bitchy.
That's smart. No, I think that's so smart. Like I didn't think of that either, just to like share some type of resource or information or website on the chronic illness that you have with your friends and your family, and just say, hey, could you do me a favor and read this so you understand what it is I'm going through and what I feel. I mean, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So that helped me a lot because now people understand and they know, like I tell my family, if I'm laying down,
yeah. We say all the time, we're like, we need a shirt that just says out of order. Like we're done. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of listeners that resonate with what you're saying and your story. We're going to have some of these resources listed on our website, but if they want to connect with you personally, how can they find you?
So I have an Instagram. It's Linda-Lieb. I'm private, but anyone can message me and I will definitely message them back because I'm ready to help those who might be suffering from the same thing and maybe, help someone get some answers and feel better.
Awesome.
Do you have any last minute words of wisdom to share?
Well, to anyone who's suffering and you're trying to find a diagnosis, hang in there. It does get better. You will feel better. I'm about to tear up. Find a good doctor and a good support system. If you can't find it in your family, find it in your friends or a coworker.
And you're not alone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you saw many doctors, so it's okay to, that's a great thing, for you to say, because like, you don't have to just stick to the one person you see. You try, the neurologist, the ophthalmologist, the ENT. It took all of those people to filter through. And that's amazing that you kept fighting.
Oh yeah, and I'm still fighting. But I got to the point where I would go see a doctor, and when they would come in, I would let them know, if you are not going to try to help me and be proactive, then I don't even need to finish this appointment.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I've got to where my doctors that I have are awesome. And any of my friends or family are having issues with anything, I'm like, go see this one or that one. And it's funny because I went to school for law and I'm in law enforcement, and I actually am thinking about going to med school. So
I love it.
Yes.
People. So
that's amazing. Do it. We need people like you.
Yeah. We're huge advocates of, if you can't find the change, be the change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your story, and we are so happy to have you advocating for Spoonies everywhere and for people that are like you and like us.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you guys for listening, and as always, we ask that you leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to.
Also, make sure you are following us on Instagram and Facebook for the latest updates, and subscribe to our website where you'll find all the details from today's podcast, as well as other amazing resources. Don't forget to check out our latest issue of the Invisible Diaries magazine.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to share your story or be featured as a Spoonie Spotlight, you can apply on our website, theinvisibleidiaries.com. Bye!